Major production funding for Vote Utah 2016 comes from Domo, connecting people with data to change the way business is managed. Domo's customers include 20% of the Fortune 50, leveraging Domo to find insights in their data and take action to improve results. Domo, powered by the Business Cloud. Learn more at domo.com. Additional production funding comes from Utah Community Credit Union, celebrating 60 years of inspiring smart decisions. Founded on BYU campus, UCCU is a not-for-profit financial institution dedicated to the simple ideal of people helping people. UCCU.com has information on how UCCU can help families and the community. And from Nu Skin, demonstrating a more than 30-year commitment to the community and offering beauty and wellness products. Discover the best you at nuskin.com.
Election results are coming into focus tonight. All evening, you've been hearing why Utah voters made the choices they made. And you've been getting reaction to those choices from Utah candidates. There's more to come. This is Vote Utah 2016 election night coverage. And we're back with coverage of this doozy of an election night. It's a nail-biter nationally for the Senate and for the White House. Not so much a nail-biter in most Utah races, except one that I think is still too close to call. Should we go through the projections from?
Yes, Utah 4, we still see as within the margin of error. We're not prepared to call it for Mia Love or Doug Owens. Mia Love is ahead, as we have previously reported. And we could put those numbers up, I think, Mark. That might be useful for the viewers. Okay, not able to right now, but it hasn't changed. And even though the numbers are still coming in, we're not confident that we can call that race.
All right. A race that we did call early on was for the 3rd District House race. Jason Chaffetz, the incumbent, chair of the House Oversight Committee, a high-profile congressman, re-elected tonight, 64% of the vote to 25% of Stephen Tryon's vote. Tryon ran 2 years ago as an independent. This year he tried it as a Democrat and got more of the vote, but not enough. Lucy Liu of KBYU 11 spoke with him just a few moments ago. Let's listen to that interview.
Lucy Liu at Salt Lake City, and here I have the Democratic candidate, Mr. Stephen Tryon, for the Utah Congressional District 3rd District. So, Mr. Tryon, this is your second time running for this office, and yet it's still an uphill battle for the Democrats. What do you think you've accomplished?
Well, you know, I think we've had some great messaging around very important issues. As I said in our debate, Congressman Chaffetz and I have very different visions of public service. And I think that that's an important distinction that the people of the 3rd District need to keep in mind. Because you can say what you want to say about a policy, and you can say what people want to hear. But if at the end of the day it doesn't wind up improving the lives of people in the 3rd District, then that's really kind of an empty statement or an empty result. So I guess what I would challenge the people of the 3rd District to do is to keep in mind that notion of the 2 distinct visions of public service, and to challenge Congressman Chaffetz to put the people of Utah first.
Now, you mentioned earlier in your speech that you encourage people to carry on those democratic principles. Right. And how do you plan on carrying them out? Well,
you know, we have a Constitution, and I've risked my life for that Constitution. So the principles by which we choose our elected officials, to me, are sacred. And whatever those processes determine, it's like I said that night at UVU at the end of my debate. I'm always going to believe I'm the best candidate. But whatever we choose together, the person we choose together is the right candidate. And we all ought to remember that as Americans. Everybody has an opinion about what's best for America. It's not the republic of me. It's not the republic of you or the republic of any individual. It's the republic of all of us together. And the constitutional process that we use to choose the outcome of who's the winner, that's what's the right answer. And we just have to remember that. There'll be another election, and I'm not going anywhere. And I'm watching you, Jason.
Are you hoping to run again?
I'm not going to be able to commit on that tonight. But, you know, I took the oath to support and defend the Constitution the first time when I was 18 years old. So to me, it's something that's it's way deep in my heart. And when I look at the way Washington has not been working, and I look at the partisanship, you know, it bothers me. And that's what motivated me to run 2 years ago. It's what motivated me to run a second time this year. And if I see no improvement in Washington, no ability to get solutions accomplished that help American people, then I'll be back.
That was a interview tape just a few moments ago, Lucy Liu and Stephen Tryon. He ran 2 years ago as an independent, got less than 2% of the vote.
That's right.
25% tonight we're projecting in the exit poll. Tryon is a retired lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army, recipient of a Bronze Star for valor in combat. And he said he'll be watching Jason Chaffetz.
Well, I think Jason Chaffetz knows he's watching. He had a commercial in which he talked about going and trying to visit him in his office and so forth. So it looks like politics may have gotten in Mr. Tryon's blood a little bit.
It may be the case. We cut off Manny over there as we were talking about the West. We were still in the middle of Nevada, I think.
That's right. Manny? That's right.
It's okay. I hope I get an A on my midterm, so.
Okay. Well, you have so far, so don't blow it in the next half. So tell us a little bit more about Nevada Senate.
Yes, sir. So where I left off was Catherine Cortez Masto has received a lot of funding from outside money groups, like Rachel mentioned. It's the third most expensive state that has spent money for these races, and the Reid machine has definitely helped Catherine Cortez Masto as far as they've had many people come down to help her out, but that does not mean that Heck has been alone. When I was down there, Heck has also received a large amount of money from outside groups to help him win that state as well. One of those is the Libre Initiative, which helps mobilize Hispanic voters and teach them about economic principles that conservatives tend to have and how they can actually help Latinos. I actually have a photo of people in the Latin Chamber of Commerce with a Spanish sign endorsing Joe Heck, and it's something very common. And one thing that I just find very interesting is how Trump is accusing many of these polling locations these polling locations had a lot of Latino voters. Yet it seems that Joe Heck is also relying on these Latino voters. So it's a toss-up to see if the Latino voters will benefit the Republican Party in that state or hurt.
Well, and sadly, I don't think there's anything like our poll in the Nevada Senate race, which would help us answer that question. Let's go to the Colorado presidential race. This is a state that would have been predictably Republican at the presidential level. I don't believe it's been called yet for either side. What's happening in Colorado tonight?
It has been called. Both Clinton and Bennett won that state.
Good. Thanks for the update.
Yeah. And so it's definitely interesting. In the past, like you mentioned, Colorado was a predictable Republican state. But from what I've read in the Denver Post, it seems that Republicans have gone too far right and Democrats have come towards the center. And because of that, Republicans are more likely to vote now for the incumbent, Senator Bennett and Hillary Clinton.
In the Senate race in Colorado, there was an interesting dynamic. A Tea Party candidate that was not supported by Mitch McConnell and national Republican leaders won in the primary. Mike Lee went there, Ted Cruz went there, but he's lost tonight. Mm-hmm. What explains Bennett's victory? How did he try and exploit that in Colorado?
A lot of the ads that Michael Bennett ran in Colorado are ads of Republicans endorsing Senator Bennett, saying, you know, I am a staunch Republican, but I do feel that Senator Bennett has represented my ideals. If we can show that clip, that'd be great.
Let's look at that. It reminded me, when I've seen this before, of ads in the Rampton and Matheson era in Utah.
That goes back a while.
Where they sort of depicted themselves as out of the same culture that this ad in Colorado shows. Let's take a look.
You know, I'm a Republican, and, you know, I'm a pretty staunch Republican, but I appreciate what Michael's doing out there.
I'm a Republican, but I know that Michael Bennett trusts us, and we trust him.
We don't always agree, but he values our input, and I do trust Michael Bennett to look out for us.
So rugged individualism, all of Colorado.
Dr. Magleby, I just got word that Nevada has called the Senate race and Catherine Cortez Masto has won the Senate.
The Democrats hold that seat then?
They will hold that, and so that is up to play, and they are fighting for majority in the Senate.
Okay, well, thanks for that update. We're nothing if not current. Now let's shift to Arizona. Bruce and I were talking earlier, Manny, about how odd it is for Arizona to not have been colored at this point. Trump has done so well in so many places, and yet Arizona is not called. Tell us what's happening.
It's interesting you mentioned that. Clinton has visited Arizona in the past, and I think it's something we're seeing in many of these states is the Latino population is becoming a very important population to be mobilized. And that's where Hillary Clinton has gone and has tried to mobilize them by having fundraisers, by having Mexican artists who appeal to the larger Mexican population there in Arizona to explain, hey, I am your candidate and I am with you. But Senator McCain has not let that back. Senator McCain has also done the same thing with his Latino support. And so it's very interesting to see how both parties are trying to mobilize this demographic.
It's no coincidence, I suspect, that both McCain and Arizona Senator Jeff Flake were part of the Gang of Eight that put together a bipartisan immigration reform package, both being from border state Arizona. So it's consistent with, I think, what you're seeing tonight. So Arizona's Senate race, has that been called for McCain?
It has. It's been called for McCain. And like you said, I think it's very similar to Utah in that immigration is also important, but also jobs. And we had Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney went down to endorse John McCain to help people recognize that he endorses John McCain, which is something that was kind of odd because we weren't expecting that from Mitt Romney.
So just one final question then. Has Arizona been called for McCain?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Manny.
We'll take a break here and go to Courtney Ellsworth, who is live in Salt Lake. She's speaking with Representative Rob Bishop, who is reelected tonight. Our projection is, I'm showing 53% of the vote. Courtney?
Yes, thank you so much for meeting with me. Congratulations on your 8th term.
Thank you, I think.
Yeah. How do you think or what do you think brought voters back to your campaign?
Well, I hate to say this, but one of the things I was hoping for is a couple of years ago, I got a letter from the leaders of my church thanking me for having a positive campaign. And especially in this year where there was so much negativity, I tried very hard to make sure that all I talked about what was I was going to do, and I didn't do anything that was negative in any way. I didn't talk about anybody else. So I hope people respected that. But I also think they're still looking at the positions I have, which means that for public lands and public water, I can ensure as chairman of the committee that Utah's voice is going to be heard. And also representing Hill Air Force Base and the military and serving on the Armed Services Committee, I think I can guarantee that we do the right thing for our military as well as for the civilian workforce that's up there. So those two things are important to me, and then I still want to go back and emphasize federalism, because I think that is an essential process that will empower people and take decisions that right now are being made by rule and regulation by executive branch bureaucrats, put them back in Congress where the founders intended it to be so that people's voices can be better heard.
Great. You've been working on the Public Lands Initiative for a while now. What's your plan with that, depending on who gets elected tonight?
Well, that's the key element on who's going to be elected. I am still going forward with it because we've invested 3 years. And I think also the outcome of this election will make a difference on people who either have been negative or positive towards it in the past. There has not been a great deal of emphasis on people who are willing to compromise. I think as the outcome of this election, if it continues on the trend we're going, I think a lot of people are going to come back to the table and are willing to compromise to make a solution to do it as quickly as we possibly can. So the outcome tonight is going to make a big difference on how we go with PLI.
Any goals for your 8th term?
Well, just those. I want to make sure that we have turned the corner on military infrastructure and military spending and rebuilding the manpower that we have to have, especially in the maintainers. I want to continue that, and then also on public lands and public water, I want to make sure that Utah has a greater voice in what happens in the state of Utah. Those are big goals of mine.
All right, thank you. I believe Dr. Magleby and Bruce Lindsay have some questions for you back in the studio.
Congressman Bishop, if you can hear us here. Congratulations on your win tonight. You said you're going to pursue the agenda of a greater federalism, and I believe it was just a week ago you introduced a resolution proposing a constitutional amendment to give states the authority to repeal any federal regulation by a 2/3 vote. How much of your political capital are you going to spend on that in the coming term?
Well, actually, the session before, I introduced another one that's a little bit wider than that, talking about laws as well as regulations. But to me, this is one of those things that as people start listening to it, and especially as the states become more involved and start to partner with us back in Washington, I think it has a life of its own, and it's going to be heard more as we go forward with it. This is not an idea that came from me. This is an idea that's brought to me by many groups of state legislators, as well as some people here in the state of Utah that want to see this thing go forward. So I think it's something whose time is maybe still in the infancy, but it's going to grow, and it's going to give a real power to the states that they can use in that balance between vertical power between the national government and the states.
Congressman Dave Magleby here. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dave.
A question. As we come out of this election, no matter who wins tonight, and we don't know yet, of course, it's very close at the presidential level. It's also unclear who's going to have the majority in the Senate. It appears clear that the Republicans will retain the majority in the House. We have a tradition in this country of rallying around whoever wins. There's been some certain uncertainty about that as expressed in this campaign. Are you concerned about that as we go forward? And will you be willing to give a president from the other party a honeymoon of at least a period of time when you give them the benefit of the doubt?
I think, look, that is the traditional approach of things, but let's face it, everything in this election year has been weird and has been different. Yeah, I think we have to give some people that kind of benefit of the doubt and see how willing everyone is to try and come together and to compromise. But once again, the principles, I think what has been said in this election is that people are dissatisfied with what we have been doing, the direction we're going in the last 8 years. They do want something different. And as long as the President and Congress are working to provide something different that empowers people, I think we can work together. But it'll take both sides of being able to work into that same common goal. Compromising just for the sake of compromise doesn't help anybody. But if it moves us towards a common goal, and I think towards answering what I think people are saying with their votes here tonight, yeah, it can happen.
If it's a President Trump on tomorrow morning or the next morning, what advice would you give him about personal conduct and values? Utah voters tonight overwhelmingly don't like Donald Trump's personality traits and attributes. They don't like Hillary Clinton either, but they dislike Trump more. They much prefer Evan McMullin. So you're going to be in Washington, and he might be there too. How would you advise him to modify himself so that more voters feel like they can respect him?
Well, first of all, I don't know if I'm going to give him any advice, he's got to ask of it first. I'm not going to give free advice to anybody, especially if they don't want it. What I'm seeing, though, is that there has to be a policy goal. And I think the policy that Trump is talking about far exceeds a lot of the foibles he has had in his past history. And if we can move towards the policy and making sure that people are going to be empowered, which is one of the themes that he's always been talking about, I think there's at least there's a 50-50 chance of having it work. And I think that's possible. Going back to your other one as well, what we did in the Puerto Rico bill, who would have thought that was going to be the most important bill I did last year? But what we did in the Puerto Rico bill is actually bring everyone together so that indeed you got a majority of the House Republicans, House Democrats, and a majority of the Senate. In fact, the Senate didn't even change the language of the bill. I think that shows that it is possible, it can happen, but it takes a concerted effort to make sure you have a common goal first and you can reach it.
Good example there on the Puerto Rico bill. All the best to you, Congressman.
Hey, thank you.
When we hear the word poll, we've been using that word quite a bit tonight, haven't we? You have to remember that the science of statistical sampling is part of that process. And we have a guest who is very adept at helping us demystify polls and make them more understandable and enlighten us tonight.
Well, we have Sarah Hodgson with us. She's from Minneapolis, Minnesota. She's a junior in statistics. She also happened to take my introductory American government class.
That's true.
And we're still on speaking terms.
I guess so.
Well, I'm glad. Tell us a little bit about how you and the other students in statistics have been involved in this year's project.
Well, I personally have been involved in helping to design the sample. So what I mean by designing the sample is making all the little decisions that lead to an individual voter being approached to participate in our survey. But we've also had tremendous help from the other students of statistics, helping man the phone centers, helping be part of the interviewing teams, as well as also helping design those surveys.
A lot of collaboration. It's almost as if the students from the two places forget that they're in different departments.
I guess so.
As they work together. It's been a very nice collaboration. So how can the reported vote of even a relatively small number of people, we have a pretty large sample actually this year for a variety of reasons, because a lot of hard work, but how can a sample predict a broader population? There's thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of Utah voters today.
Yes, that's a great question. Because we believe that a sample, even a small sample, can be representative. I like to explain this using an analogy of your underlying population as being a giant pot of soup. So in order to understand or to taste that soup, you don't need to drink half the pot of soup or even a tenth of the pot of soup. All that you really need is a spoonful, given that the soup is well stirred. So when we're creating a representative sample, what we're really doing is making sure that soup is well stirred. And when you hear the word representative, you might think, oh, that means that they make sure they get the right number of women and the right number of people of certain nationalities, et cetera, et cetera. But honestly, if we were to do it that way, we would get a very bad sample, which is why we have to incorporate randomization. So randomization is much smarter than we are in knowing what a representative population looks like. So we split up the population in a few ways, but honestly, not that many.
What are some of those ways we split up the population?
Depending on what part of the sample, like early vote or election day vote, somewhat according to geographic and political boundaries, so according to county and congressional district. And for the early vote, we do it somewhat according to political party, but for the most part, most of it is according to political boundaries.
Well, and so within counties with conventional precincts, we can do the sampling in a pretty straightforward way, right? We can
comparatively
pick those. That's how we did this exit poll for many years. Now we've got this early voting dynamic, and we have to somehow take both sides, that is the early voting and the election day voting today, and put them together. How do you do that?
Well, that's a great question. So the methods that we use for the early vote versus the election day vote are actually quite different. So I'm going to talk about the early vote first for a second. So for the early vote, we've been able to get lists of voters who have already voted within the state of Utah from the Utah state government. And we've been taking random samples, as I was saying, split up somewhat according to congressional district, as well as party affiliation. And then we take random samples from there. So from there, we are able to send them mailers, inviting them to take the survey online, as we've also been calling them fairly regularly, inviting them to take the survey. So we've been doing that approximately once a week since mid-October. And, you know, basically, it's mostly just a random sample from that list. However, the election day vote is more complicated. It's a huge logistical operation that we wouldn't be able to do without the collaboration of the 8 colleges we have throughout the state of Utah participating in our poll.
Right.
So you want to talk about that?
Yes, but I want to go back. Isn't it amazing that people are willing to do this?
Yes, I mean, extra credit is a powerful force.
Well, no, I'm not talking about the students doing the phoning. I'm talking about the people at the other end of the phone line. The people who get the postcard and log on to their computer. I mean, these are busy people. Why do you think they do it?
Well, I think there is something to be said for feeling like your voice matters, feeling like your voice is really being heard. And this year, as we've been talking about all night, I think that Utahns are really realizing that their voice does matter. And because of that, they've been participating in our poll.
Good. So now let's go to the election day polling.
Okay, awesome. So for the first way that we split it up is, again, according to political boundaries. So Utah is split not only into the 4 congressional districts, but also into several counties. And again, as we've been talking about throughout the night, there are some differences as far as how the voting works according to the different counties. So we have several layers of randomization built in, and depending a little bit according to the county. But I'm going to use kind of a more traditional example in which they have lots and lots of voting centers. People have to go to a particular voting center, and we aren't going to all the voting centers within that county. So in that case, we randomly select some of the voting centers to go to approach people for our poll. But we don't do it just absolutely randomly. We also want to take into account the size of the polling place, how many people we expect to come there. Because if we're only going to tiny polling places in the mountains, then that's probably going to bias our sample even more.
Sarah, is that not a key precinct model then? You're not seeking out voting precincts that typically are already known to be representative of the whole?
That's not quite how it works. Randomization is better at it than we are.
Than key precincts.
Yes.
Okay.
So some of your predecessors would say, Professor Christensen is here tonight, who helped with an early sample. As I recall, 82 or 84, we drew Daggett County. It only has one voting place, and I went to your class and I said, it's really hard to get there. You'd have to stay in Evanston. I'm worried about the snow. Could we not do Daggett County? And your classmates said, yeah, you could do Paiute, but you have to give us 2 future draft picks.
Close enough.
And it did increase the margin of error, but it was safer for us. So sometimes you have to confront reality.
No,
right?
it's true. There's always a trade-off. And that's something that, again, because of all the changes we're seeing this year and a whole variety of factors, there's always that trade-off between logistics and just making sure you have the most clear randomization and the smallest margin of error possible.
So how did reality make our lives more difficult in the sample this year?
So many fun ways. Throughout the day, I actually was also helping out kind of in our the center where we help students who are out in the field, helping them solve their problems. And a lot of what I was hearing is, oh, we forgot to do it the way that you asked us to. We did this wrong, we did this wrong. Well, you could have told us that 2 hours ago, but that's what happens when you're able to get all these amazing volunteers. You know, remarkably few problems for the amount of people that we had.
Right, right. Well, there are always going to be those kinds of challenges. At the end of the day, we're going to know how well we did, right?
Yeah,
So
hopefully.
isn't this an unusual sampling project in that there really is a real live event that come 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning, we'll be able to compare our predicted results with what actually happened.
Yes.
And when we've done that in the past, how have we done?
We've done remarkably well. We have a very accurate poll, and we're very proud of that.
And probability theory says that you're going to do that 25, how many times out of what?
I think that the one that we always rely on is the 19 times out of 20.
20, yeah, 95 times out of 100, 19 times out of 20.
Yeah.
We've been doing this about 20 times. This isn't going to be the one time we're off, is it?
No, of course not, Dr. Magleby.
The only thing I remember from my BYU stat class is there's no maturity of chances, so we don't have to worry about
Thank you, Bruce. I'm glad you took that class. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. James Peterson of KBYU 11 spoke just a few moments ago to Misty Snow, the Democratic candidate for Senate in Utah, and he recorded an interview with her, and we'll roll that now.
I'm here with Misty Snow. Misty Snow, right now the polls are showing that Mike Lee is ahead 30% right now, but throughout your campaign, you've been trying to get millennials to come out and vote. How do you feel you've done that?
I think I've done well, and Mike Lee might be ahead, but I haven't seen results out of Salt Lake County yet. We're still waiting on, and we do know that's where a lot of the Democratic vote will come out of. And so if he's only ahead by 30 points, I'm probably doing a lot better than most people thought. So that actually sounds really encouraging. And if I even rather than I win, even if I just pass 33%, that'd be a huge win for Democrats in the state of Utah, because that would be the best showings for a Democratic Senate candidate in the state since '92.
So as a newcomer, let's talk about that. What do you think the state of the Democratic Party here in Utah is?
I think it's never been stronger in my life. It's certainly, I've seen more organization from the Utah Democratic Party this year than I've ever seen in my lifetime, at least as long as I've been paying attention to politics. I'd say I've seen a lot more organization in counties outside of Salt Lake, and I think that the numbers are showing that we are doing a bit better. I think we're going to pick up several legislative seats, state legislative seats this election, and I think we're going to do better in some of the statewide races than we usually do.
All right, thank you, Misty Snow. James Peterson, Vote Utah 2016.
That was taped just a few minutes ago with Misty Snow, who our projection is that she will finish tonight with 30% of the vote, which is right kind of in the margin for the senatorial elections going back the last 20 or 30 years in Utah for a Democratic candidate.
Well, and a remarkable story for her, because she was inexperienced in politics. She got in
completely
late. She did well enough at the convention to force a primary. She defeated a candidate who was better funded and had spent more time getting ready. And then as a person who, has to be described as an underdog in such a race, does about as well as a candidate for governor like Mr. Weinholz.
She held her own with the party.
Exactly. And there was very little attrition. You might have thought there might have been some. There wasn't much.
It'd be interesting to ask her about what she thinks she's added to the conversation, because that generation, as you indicated a few minutes ago, has been less active politically, and so she was a
Well, it's clear that
there.
she's added one thing to the conversation that's probably worth mentioning. I mean, she is the first transgender candidate for the United States Senate of a major party in history. And that was a major element of the coverage of her. I think it frustrated her a bit.
She didn't make it an issue. It wasn't the centerpiece of her campaign, but you couldn't ignore it.
She wanted to have it focus on a set of issues and so forth, but she didn't run away from it either. And so, for instance, when we hosted the debate here at KBYU between Misty Snow and Mike Lee, there was national press here, I think in part because of the uniqueness or the newness of her candidacy. And so she became a bit of a national figure within the transgender community, and that doesn't seem to have affected her vote in any adverse way compared to other Democrats.
As someone who has never been to Washington, as you like to say, never been to college, and never had any other electoral experience,
but she actually
held
told
her own.
Sweet stories about people at Harmon's giving her a cake the day she won the primary. They went to the bakery and they'd ordered a cake and they came and presented it to her, people that she's checked out for years at Harmon's in downtown Salt Lake. So it's a fascinating story at that personal level, holding aside party. It's quite an amazing story.
It is.
It's time to do a little bit of a round robin and an update with our regional analysts about this battle for the Senate. And so we're curious about the winners and the losers so far. And I'm going to focus on states, but I'm going to count on you to remind me of any that I've overlooked. Let's start in the Northeast with Rachel Finlayson. New Hampshire, been called?
Nope, has not been called yet.
Not called. Pennsylvania?
Has not been called yet either.
Okay.
Both leaning blue, however, based on the map that we have. I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Magleby.
No, that's good to know.
That would be the indication. Too close to call, but leaning Democratic.
Well, that's critical in terms of how we're getting to the majority. So we're going to want to get it when they're actually called. But in terms of interest in our viewers, and especially my interest, thank you for that update. Go ahead.
It seems that in Pennsylvania, it hasn't been called yet, but the map that I'm looking at has 96% reporting, and it's tied, but with Donald Trump slightly ahead.
96% reporting. How interesting. And the Pennsylvania presidential has not been called either, if I'm correct.
Correct. That's what I was talking about. It hasn't been called yet, but
Okay.
it's at 96%.
But with Trump leading. Now what about the Senate?
For the Senate in Pennsylvania, let's see. I don't have that map up in front of me, but it looks like it's going to Toomey.
Going to Toomey by about the
It's a close race,
same
but
margin?
going to Toomey.
Okay.
Right, because now they're counting votes in the more rural areas. At first, they were counting inside Philadelphia, which is more popular for Clinton and McGuinty, but now they're counting the votes outside those areas.
And just a heads up, sometimes those rumors are not always true, and so it'll be fun to watch. North Carolina, this one is Elizabeth. Has that one been called?
Yes, that one has been called. Richard Burr was able to win that state by 7%.
Okay, so the Republicans hold that. We talked about Illinois earlier having been called. What about Wisconsin?
We are looking at Wisconsin in the presidential, that it is too soon to be called, but Trump is leading.
What about in the Senate?
As far as the Senate, we have announced the winner. Ron Johnson takes the Senate House.
So Republicans hold that.
Yes, they hold that seat.
Okay, so the margin or the pathway to a Republican, to a Democratic majority is slim, and it looks like Republicans could easily hold it. Nevada has not been called, right, Manny? For Senate?
For Senate, yes, it's Catherine Cortez Masto.
Okay, so they hold that one.
They hold.
Okay, and in Colorado, that one they've held as well.
Yes, sir.
So the only change so far, if I'm tracking this correct, is Illinois, a net gain of 1. Have there been any other Democratic pickups tonight?
No.
No. And there have been no Republican pickups tonight?
No.
Okay. So we would currently be at 47 Democrats, and they would need to win 3, and the ones that are not called are New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and that's it, right? So it looks like it's a Republican Senate. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you have it. So Senator Hatch will remain, if that's true, President Pro Tem of the United States Senate. The President Pro Tem is the most senior member in terms of continuous service in the chamber of the majority party. He's third in line to the president.
After the vice president and the speaker of the House.
After the vice president and the speaker of the House.
He have a Secret Service detail that follows him around?
He does have a Secret Service detail. And I think he's liked it. So one reason why I think he hedges on whether he's going to run again is, you know, this is kind of fun for someone who's given as much of his life.
Well, he clearly walked that back as a campaign issue in 2012, which every politician, I guess, is entitled to do.
Right. Now, in terms of regional analysts, in terms of the Electoral College, last time we had it, it's still too close to call. No candidate has emerged with 270 electoral votes. Is that right?
Yeah.
A whole lot, therefore, is hanging on. New Hampshire, which Rachel's been watching and has talked to us about, Pennsylvania, and you reported on that, Wisconsin, which we've reported on, and Arizona. Has any further evidence come in on Omaha in Nebraska? Okay, so Nebraska the same, and in Maine, in upper or lower Maine, still look like it's going to be Clinton?
Statewide, it's still looking like it'll go to Clinton.
And we don't know about whether upper Maine might go to Trump.
We're still not sure. That
could be pivotal tonight, actually. These single state electors, there have been scenarios that got it to 269, 269.
The big state remaining is Pennsylvania, is it not?
The very big state, and it's 97% of the vote in, Rachel said.
Wow. All right, let's take an interview right now we have with Charlene Albron. Spoke just a few minutes ago to our Lucy Liu. Charlene Albron, a first-time candidate in Utah's 2nd congressional race.
I'm here with Ms. Charlene Albron, Utah's 2nd District Democratic candidate. Ms. Charlene, this was first try for the Congress seat. What do you think you've done from this?
I think I've helped bring unity to Utah, and that was one of the things I wanted to accomplish, to bring people together, no matter what race, creed, color, gender preference, Democrats or Republicans, because I will cross the aisle and bring people together, bring unity to Utah.
That's right. Now, I know that you came into this race hoping to gain the Hispanic voters. How do you think you've done among the Hispanic population?
Well, it's not only Hispanic voters, however, I did watch out for them, but it's also the Asians, the African Americans, the Native Americans, the LGBT community, all these different communities, but also the Hispanics. And what I'm hoping is that all of them got out and voted.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
That was Lucy Liu with Charlene Albron just a few minutes ago at the Democratic Party at the Sheraton Hotel in Salt Lake City.
It's important to note that she did better, marginally, but somewhat better than Democrats have generally done. If I were Mr. Stewart, I'd worry a little bit about Charlene Albron coming back again. You know, sometimes after an election, the morning after, there's an old story about the Democrats getting together at the Alta Club and deciding that they really should have gone much harder in 1970 for the House. And they decided that morning they were going to take out 2 years later, a Republican from that district. That's when Wayne Owens was recruited. I don't think he started walking the state then, but he was elected in 1972 because a candidate underperformed a little bit. It can lead to a kind of a signal. And Albron, I think, surprised some people. I think she's a potential person to run.
She had a rocky start as he challenged her residency. Her campaign was largely self-funded, a certain amount of personal money there. But yeah, she made her mark. Formerly, I think, a Miss Idaho. Right. She's from Pocatello, went to Boise State, and has a business background, so we'll probably hear from her.
I don't think we've heard the last of Charlene Albron. Joining us now is Dan Williams from the Statistics Department, who has been working really hard on helping make sure that the sample is as good as it can be, and advising us at every break, Bruce, about whether this race has become callable.
Is it callable?
4th Congressional District. Tell us what you think, Dan.
It's not yet callable. We're still with the lead there for Love, but it's not quite outside of the margin of error. So we're still...
and we're relatively conservative about that compared
to conservative. 99% confidence intervals. We want to make sure if we're going to make the call that that's really what we believe is going to be the case.
So back to the question we talked a bit earlier about with the construction of the sample. It's become more complicated now that we have early vote as well as Election Day vote, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. As we try to make it easier for the electorate to vote, At the same time, it makes it a little bit more difficult in some ways for election officials and for those who wish to sample. With many options for people to vote, we have to find ways to capture those different ways. This year we even added trying to go to drop-by boxes and catch people in their cars who were dropping off votes so that we could make sure we were capturing all elements of the population.
You can blame me for that one. Dan knows that over the weekend I was worrying about some press releases about the low level of voting and that Salt Lake County was pushing these drop boxes. To the best of my knowledge, no exit poll in history has ever surveyed people after they turned their ballots into a drop box.
Yeah, that's a new one, and we'll evaluate that and see. We certainly saw that there was a need to do that.
From a car?
Yes.
From a car.
Chase them down the highway?
Well, what got me to do it is I went to Sherry Swenson's website, and she posted where the drop boxes would be. Then I pulled up our sample and the places of the drop boxes, and some of them were not at the same place. Some of them were. All of them were at curbs that had quite a bit of distance. So I said, you know, you've seen the guy with the pizza sign. Why couldn't we have a student holding a please participate in our exit poll sign? And hopefully some of those would pull up and let us hand them the survey in their car, complete it, and hand it back to us. And what was our response rate so far?
It's comparable to a very good phone response rate. So we were in about 25% response rate, and that's from people who are driving by in a car just after they've dropped something off. So I
probably busy people, and would be easier to reject you, I think, in a car, and I'm busy, than face to face. When you're literally in their personal space, and so I'm a little surprised that it went as well as it did.
Yeah,
and so far no one got hurt.
To my knowledge, no one has been injured, but we'll have our debriefing tomorrow and find out all of the stories that go along with this.
Comes back maybe to Sarah's point that people like to have their voice heard. Once they've done their civic duty to vote, they'd like to go on record, and they're very often happy to tell you what they did.
And I think it goes a long way. I mean, for 30 some odd years, we've now been doing this, and a lot of the people that are out there, they did this. They volunteered as students at one of the different colleges and universities. They've been involved, and so when they see someone's approaching them, they have a little sympathy, and we bank on that to be able to get good numbers to be able to share. And so the good voters of Utah who have participated in our poll, many thanks to them for being able to deliver these numbers, but also to the students in the colleges and universities that get involved.
Now, we've talked tonight about how there's political science questions that we haven't had a chance to answer, that the data, just the preliminary look at the data, suggest or prompt. What are some of the kinds of research or data analysis things that the statistics students will do with these samples?
Well, the interesting thing, I mean, we use this as a learning experience for the students, and so we have students from all sorts of different backgrounds, and so we may have people learning how to do sampling now that they may use to detect Zika virus on mosquitoes in the future, but it's similar techniques, and would they learn the sampling procedures and learn what goes along with that. And the nice thing about an exit poll is tomorrow we know what the final result was, and we can compare how well we did, and we can look at where we maybe had some problems and what we can adjust in the future. And so it's a great learning experience.
It's a treasure trove of data for people like Dr. Magleby, I suppose. You've got all of this information. What happens to that down the road? Not tomorrow, but as the academicians study that and say, what do we learn from this election?
Well, you've heard me mention to candidates, it's a tradition that's been true from the beginning that we prepare a report on the data that we make available to the candidates in both parties after the fact. And that summarizes much of the data that we did tonight, but we can dig into more detail. We feel like any person who runs for office will do it for McMullen, will do it for Trump and Clinton's campaigns, ought to have some sense. This is a public enterprise, and we think it is a public service. We will also use it as students. So there are within my class of 35 students, about 12 teams of students in 2s and 3s that are going to present posters. They've identified subject matters. They've helped write the questions. The same thing's been true of students from UVU, the same thing from USU. So they helped submit questions that they will actually use in research papers in their own political science classes. And then, as Dan knows, because Utah has this experience with this project, we are looked to by others as a testing ground for sampling techniques. So 2 years ago, we did a paper after our 2014 data on what we call the multi-mode sample design that Professor Christensen and Professor Williams and a student and Joe Olson and I did.
A paper in a professional journal, I guess.
Yes, at a professional meeting. And what we showed is that that to be able to reach all voters, you can't just use telephone. You need to use internet. We learned earlier about the different partisan tendencies of those. And you can't exclude the election day voters. They're different. And so you need the multi-modes, the 3 different modes, and you have to therefore have a set of underlying statistical principles as you merge that, which is what I call it the magic that Dan and his students and Professor Christensen and the others that help with this do. And it's a complicated project.
Enormously complicated.
And this year most complicated than any other year because we had no baseline data. Why is the absence of baseline data a big problem for us this year?
Well, it's huge. When you have a county that's trying to accommodate voters by going to an all-mail system, all of the past information we had about precincts and how likely that particular precinct is to cooperate or to turn out, that's kind of gone and mixed all together into this, big county.
Pot of soup, if we want to.
Yeah, it's a pot of soup, and we tried that. So we looked at some techniques to be able to do that, and there's a lot of research that's come out of it. I got 100 students now who are trying to do their research projects based on this data. So it's a wonderful experience to learn and to grow and to study from.
One other thing, Bruce, that I think is unique about it is there's this cooperation on campus between statistics, communications, and political science, where we can all learn from each other, student to student and faculty to faculty.
It's been a joy to watch, sitting in on your class the last few weeks, to see the way they move across disciplines.
They almost forget that they're from different disciplines, which is not the beginning point.
Start to get along with each other.
But then you take these institutions from Utah State, the University of Utah, UVU, BYU, and so forth, you move through the state. It's very rare, especially among undergraduates, for there to be collaboration in academic work. And this project really wouldn't be possible if we didn't have that. And it's at both the faculty level, but also the students doing the work. And to a remarkable extent, we forget which schools we're from.
Well, let me, as a bystander, commend you and the whole enterprise for the service that you give not only to the students, which is an incredible academic experience, but to the people of Utah, because nobody else is playing this game at all anymore. It's terrific.
Well, we're able to accomplish things because students will do things for extra credit or for their curriculum that they...
Or pizza.
Yeah, or pizza, but if we had to pay them all, we couldn't possibly pull this off. And
That's right.
The volunteerism is great.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Good to have you, Dan. I'm told we have an update of the electoral map, and I hope that we also have some electoral numbers on the screen. And if you can see them, we can't. But since we last looked, David, here we come. 215 for Clinton, 243 for Trump, and the magic number is 270. And the states that have yet to be assigned, Pennsylvania is the great big one, could be the deciding factor. Wisconsin, still New Hampshire, and Arizona.
Great.
What would you call it, a nail biter?
Oh, it's very much a nail biter. And as we've heard from our regional analysts, there are different kind of signals coming out. Sometimes one network gets ahead of the others. A student mentioned that Fox had called one state. Our rule tonight, Bruce, is we have to have at least 2 of the major networks calling. We include Fox as one of those. So that's one reason we're being a bit conservative as we are with our sampling. So this presidential race is not determined.
It's not determined. We probably added about as much to the conversation as we're able to do here tonight.
That's right.
We are grateful to all of the students from the communications department, the political science department, the statistics department, and the professors that back them up, and the 8 colleges and universities up and down the state who made possible the Utah College's exit projection. And when you say that it's too close to call because it's within the margin of error, you are very conservative pollsters that
Yes,
way.
we are.
But we'll leave that up in the air until tomorrow the sun comes up and have a better idea. We hope we've added to your understanding of the election of 2016 as you've participated in our great democracy. At this point, we'll leave you in the competent hands of PBS for continued late election night coverage from PBS NewsHour, headed by Judy Woodruff and Gwen Eiffel, with Dr. David Magleby and all of the BYU crew. We thank you for joining us. We wish you a good night.
The KBYU Utah Colleges Exit Poll is a joint collaboration among Utah's public and private colleges and universities. More than 1,200 students across many academic disciplines volunteer to talk to voters. They reach out to them during early voting and vote-by-mail days by way of telephone surveys. On Election Day, they interview citizens as they leave voting locations after voting. The KBYU Utah College's exit poll gratefully acknowledges the contributions of students and supervising faculty at Utah institutions of higher learning for their generous donation of time and energy in making this project possible. Major financial support for conducting the KBYU Utah College's exit poll comes from the Semnani Family Foundation, promoting research, education, and civic initiatives in Utah and around the world. Additional financial support is generously provided by the following Brigham Young University entities: the BYU Mentored Research Fund, the College of Family, Home, and Social Sciences, the Center for the Study of Elections and Democracy, the Department of Political Science, the Department of Statistics, and the School of Communications.